In 1849, a Kansas drover paid $14 for a knife that could gut a bear, chop firewood, and win a bar fight in Dodge City. Today, that same blade sits behind museum glass while tourists walk past without a second glance. But here is what historians do not tell you. Number 17 on this list killed more men than Billy the Kid and Jesse James combined. And number 4, the U.S. Army tried to bury its history for nearly 70 years. These 25 weapons built the American frontier, but gun makers spent decades making us forget they existed. Because here is the truth nobody talks about. If you knew what your great-great-grandfather carried on his saddle, you would understand how the West was really won. Before we start, hit subscribe. Let us count down the 25 forgotten weapons that tamed the American frontier. Number 25, the Arkansas's toothpick. In rough camps along the Mississippi in 1836, a drifter could walk out of a blacksmith shop with an Arkansas toothpick for about $2.50. This was no kitchen knife. A straight, double-edged dagger with a blade often 12 to 18 inches long, balanced for throwing, and designed for stabbing through a heavy leather coat. James Black, the Arkansas smith who forged the original Bowie knife, made these beasts for riverboat gamblers and gold seekers heading west. You wore it sheathed along the spine or strapped to your thigh under buckskin. In the rough towns along the Natchez Trace, more men died from toothpick wounds than from pistol balls because lead rounds often passed through a body without hitting anything vital. The toothpick did not. When Colt revolvers grew cheap enough for common men in the 1870s, the toothpick faded into obscurity. But at the old State House in Little Rock today, one still sits behind glass, its blade darkened with age. Number 24, the Slungshot. A length of rope, a leather pouch, and a lead ball the size of a walnut. That was all a slungshot was. And that is why every teamster, bullwhacker, and saloon bouncer in Denver carried one tucked into a coat pocket in the 1860s. Swing it overhand, and you could crack a man's skull through a felt hat. A gunsmith in Sacramento sold finished ones for 50 cents in 1861 and advertised them as for the gentleman's protection. The slungshot was silent, concealable, and perfectly legal in most territories when revolvers were being banned inside town limits. Drovers preferred them for crowded saloon fights where a pistol shot might hit the wrong man. Police records from San Francisco's Barbary list slungshot as the cause of death in nearly 1 in 5 tavern killings between 1858 and 1868. Today it is outlawed in 48 states, and most Americans have never heard the word. Number 23, the Pepperbox pistol. Before Samuel Colt's revolver dominated the frontier, the Pepperbox ruled. 6 separate barrels bundled together like a nest of steel pipes, each loaded individually, rotating with every pull of the trigger. Allen and Thurber of Massachusetts sold them for around $10 in 1845. And every greenhorn heading to California for the gold rush bought one at the St. Louis Outfitters. Mark Twain carried a Pepperbox across the plains in 1861 and wrote in Roughing It that his Pepperbox could not hit anything except by accident, once killing a cow 2 lots over from his target. Still, at knife fighting range across a card table, 6 barrels of .36 caliber were terrifying. The problem was chain fire. All 6 barrels sometimes discharged at once, blowing the pistol apart in your hand. When Colt's reliable revolver dropped to $20 a unit, the Pepperbox vanished from every holster in the West. Number 22, the Coach Gun. A short, double-barreled shotgun, usually 12 gauge, with barrels cut down to about 18 inches. Every Wells Fargo guard from 1852 onward rode with one across his lap, which is exactly why the phrase riding shotgun entered the American language. Cost from Stevens Arms in 1870 was around $18, and it was the most feared weapon on any stagecoach route in the West. Loaded with buckshot, a coach gun could clear a narrow canyon road at 30 yards, turning a four-man hold-up crew into a problem for the undertaker. Pinkerton records show coach guns killed or wounded over 200 road agents between 1855 and 1885. Unlike a rifle, you did not need to aim, you just pointed. That is why elderly shotgun messengers, some of them missing an eye or a hand from previous attempts, kept their jobs into their 60s. When railroads replaced stagecoaches, the coach gun rolled into history with them. Number 21, the Volcanic pistol. Before Smith & Wesson made revolvers, they made this strange lever-action pistol in 1855, selling for $24 in New Haven, Connecticut. It fired a self-contained rocket ball, a hollow lead bullet with the powder packed inside, making it one of the earliest attempts at a self-contained cartridge. A shooter could fire 10 rounds as fast as he could work the lever, an unheard-of rate of fire for the period. The problem was power. The little rocket ball carried so little powder it could not penetrate a thick coat at 25 yards. The Volcanic Arms Company went bankrupt in 1857, and a shirt maker named Oliver Winchester bought the remains. He used the technology to create the Henry rifle, and eventually the Winchester rifle that conquered the West. Without the failed Volcanic, there would be no Winchester. Yet almost no one today has ever heard of the pistol that started it all. Number 20, the LeMat revolver, first pattern break. Here is where things get strange. A 9-shot revolver with a second, smaller barrel underneath that fired a single blast of buckshot. Designed in New Orleans by Dr. Jean LeMat. In 1856, it was the personal sidearm of Confederate generals J.E.B. Stuart and P.G.T. Beauregard. After the Civil War, surviving LeMats traveled west with former Confederates looking to start over in Texas and Arizona. At $35 in 1862, it was expensive, but a LeMat gave its owner 9 pistol shots plus a shotgun blast, all from one gun. Here is what history forgets. The LeMat was the most advanced revolver in the world in 1861. A single cavalryman could take on 3 attackers and still have a shotgun barrel for the last one. Only about 2,900 were ever made, and most were lost to the war. Today, an original LeMat in working condition sells for over $20,000. They were erased from the frontier story because Confederates carried them and the victors write history. Number 19, the push dagger. Also called a punch knife, this was a small, T-shaped blade about 4 inches long that sat in your palm like a set of brass knuckles with a spike. Louisiana gamblers invented it around 1840, and by 1870, every faro dealer in San Antonio had one strapped to the inside of his forearm or tucked into a vest pocket. You did not stab with it. You punched with it. The handle sat across the palm, and the blade projected between the middle and ring fingers. At close range, it was devastating, capable of punching through a rib cage in a single strike. A good push dagger cost $3 to $5, and they were legal to carry concealed in most saloons when full-size knives were not. Wyatt Earp's brother Morgan reportedly carried one the night he was murdered in Tombstone. When small pocket pistols became cheap and reliable in the 1890s, the push dagger became a relic almost overnight. Number 18, the Bullwhip. Most people think of a bullwhip as a tool, not a weapon, but in the hands of a frontier teamster, a 12-foot leather whip was lethal, close quarters, capable of taking an eye out at 20 feet or stripping flesh to the bone with a single practiced stroke. The tip of a bullwhip breaks the sound barrier, reaching nearly 770 miles per hour. That crack is a miniature sonic boom delivered to flesh. Mule drivers on the Santa Fe Trail in the 1840s used their whips to fight off Comanche raiders, particularly at night, when firing a rifle would give away a position. A handmade plated whip cost about $8 in 1855, more than a week's wages, but it lasted a decade if cared for. When barbed wire and trucks replaced ox teams, the bullwhip faded from practical use. Most Americans today know it only from Indiana Jones films and have no idea it ever killed men. Number 17. The Bowie knife, the big killer. Here it is, the weapon that actually killed more men than all the famous outlaws combined. Named for Jim Bowie, who used a primitive version in the sandbar fight of 1827, the classic Bowie was a 10-inch clip-point blade with a brass crossguard forged to function as knife, hatchet, and short sword in one tool. By 1840, every man heading west bought one, paying $5 to $20 depending on the maker. A Sheffield, England-made Bowie with an ivory handle might cost $25, a small fortune. Between 1840 and 1880, coroner records from 7 western states attribute more deaths to Bowie knife wounds than to gunshot wounds in drunken fights and tavern brawls. Billy the Kid killed 9 men. Jesse James maybe 16. The Bowie killed thousands. Why? Because in a crowded saloon, a knife never ran out of ammunition, never misfired, and never required reloading. Every cowboy in Dodge City carried one, and every lawman feared them more than pistols. Long before the Colt Peacemaker, the trade tomahawk was currency across the frontier. American and British manufacturers produced hundreds of thousands of them in Pittsburgh and Birmingham, shipping them west to trade for beaver pelts, buffalo hides, and horses. A basic iron tomahawk cost about 75 cents at a trading post in 1840. A pipe tomahawk with a hollow handle that doubled as a tobacco pipe might cost $4. White trappers, mountain men, and buffalo hunters adopted them immediately because a tomahawk worked as axe, hammer, weapon, and tool in one package. Jim Bridger, Jedediah Smith, and Kit Carson all carried them. In hand-to-hand combat, a tomahawk was faster than a knife and had greater reach. It could cut through a cavalry hat or shatter a rifle stock with equal ease. Today it is associated almost entirely with native warriors, but the reality is that every frontiersman carried one too. Number 15. The Cavalry Saber. The 1860 light cavalry saber weighed just over 2 pounds, with a 35-inch curved blade designed for slashing from horseback. Every United States cavalryman from the Civil War through the Indian Wars carried one on his left hip. The Army paid for them at around $7 a unit. Here is what most people do not know. In the Indian Wars, sabers killed more warriors than carbines in close combat. A trooper galloping through a Cheyenne or Sioux camp could strike down a man in one pass without stopping. General George Custer famously ordered his men to leave their sabers at the regimental supply train before the Battle of the Little Bighorn, fearing the noise would give away their position. Some historians argue that if the 7th Cavalry had carried sabers that day, the outcome might have been different. By 1905, the saber was declared obsolete. Tens of thousands were melted down or sold to collectors for $1 apiece. The Kentucky long rifle was the original American frontier weapon, made by German and Swiss gunsmiths who settled in Pennsylvania in the 1730s. By the time the westward push started in earnest, after 1800, the Kentucky long rifle was the rifle of choice for every explorer, trapper, and Indian scout. With a barrel up to 48 inches long and a caliber around 40, it could kill a deer at 200 yards and a man at 300 yards. A handmade Kentucky rifle cost $25 to $40 in 1820, the price of a good horse. Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, and Lewis and Clark all carried variants of it. Its long barrel gave the black powder time to burn completely, producing devastating accuracy. The rifle was so long that mountain men had to dismount to load it, which is exactly why the shorter Hawken eventually replaced it. But from 1775 to 1840, the Kentucky long rifle was the most effective infantry weapon in the world. Number 13, the Hawken rifle. When mountain men realized the Kentucky long rifle was too unwieldy for buffalo country, Jacob and Samuel Hawken of St. Louis designed its replacement in the 1820s. It was shorter, with a barrel only 34 inches long and chambered in a beefy 50 or 54 caliber. The Hawken was the rifle Jim Bridger, Kit Carson, and Hugh Glass carried into the Rocky Mountains. It cost $22.50 in 1840 at the Hawken shop on Laurel Street in St. Louis, and mountain men often saved an entire winter's trapping money to buy one. A Hawken could drop a grizzly at 100 yards, and its shorter barrel meant you could load it on horseback. When Jim Bridger was asked in 1868 what weapon he would want in a fight, he said, "Give me a good Hawken and a knife." The Hawken disappeared when breech-loading rifles arrived in the 1860s, but for 40 years, it was the most trusted weapon in the Rocky Mountain fur trade. Number 12, the Blunderbuss, second pattern break. Now here is something that will shock you. Stagecoach drivers in California and Oregon were still carrying blunderbusses, a weapon most Americans associate with pilgrims, as late as 1855. A short-barreled flintlock with a flared muzzle, the blunderbuss was loaded with whatever a driver could find: nails, gravel, rock salt, broken bottle glass. When fired, it sprayed that shrapnel in a wide cone. Here is the historical oddity. Wells Fargo actually issued blunderbusses to a handful of drivers working the remote mountain routes between Sacramento and the mining camps, because black powder shotgun shells were not yet reliable at high altitude. At close range on a narrow canyon road, a blunderbuss could unhorse 3 bandits at once. The weapon cost about $12 in 1850, and most were made in Belgium. Historians writing the polished story of the West erased the blunderbuss because it sounded absurd, like something out of Thanksgiving iconography. But the reality is that blunderbusses guarded gold shipments through the Sierra Nevada for years. Designed in 1847 by Samuel Colt and Texas Ranger Captain Samuel Walker, this was the most powerful handgun in the world for 88 years, only surpassed in 1935 by the .357 Magnum. Nearly 5 pounds of steel, firing a .44 caliber ball with 60 grains of black powder, the Walker had enough power to drop a horse at 50 yards. Only 1,100 were made, and Captain Walker was killed carrying one in Mexico before he ever saw the final production version. Texas Rangers used them to devastating effect against Comanche raiders, firing 6 shots where a previous weapon would have fired 1. At $50 a pistol in 1847, a Colt Walker cost more than a horse. Today, an original Walker in good condition sells for up to $1 million at auction. Almost none survived hard service, which is why they are the rarest American handgun ever made. Number 10, the Colt Dragoon. The Colt Walker was too heavy, so Colt shrank it in 1848 into the Dragoon, weighing 4 pounds instead of 5 pounds. The Dragoon became standard issue for the U.S. Army Cavalry, paid at $28 a unit, and it was the sidearm of every mounted officer during the Mexican-American War and into the Civil War. Wild Bill Hickok carried 2 dragoons backwards in his belt, butts forward for a cavalry-style cross-draw. The Dragoon was a cap and ball revolver, meaning you loaded it with loose powder, a ball, and a percussion cap for each of 6 chambers. It took about 3 minutes to reload, which is why men carried 2. Between 1848 and 1860, nearly 20,000 dragoons rode west, and many became the first weapons of the California Gold Rush. When Colt introduced the cartridge-firing Peacemaker in 1873, the Dragoon was rendered obsolete overnight. Number 9. The Remington 1858 New Model Army. Colt's only serious competitor in the Civil War era. The Remington 1858 used a solid frame design, meaning the top strap of the revolver was forged as one piece, making it far stronger than the open-top Colt. It sold to the Army for $15, slightly less than the Colt. Buffalo Bill Cody carried a Remington 1858 during his early scouting days. The revolutionary feature was swappable cylinders. A man could carry 3 preloaded cylinders in his pocket and reload his pistol in 15 seconds by swapping them out, an unheard-of rate of fire for 1860. This is the revolver that Clint Eastwood's character carries in Pale Rider, which most viewers assume is a Colt. When metallic cartridges arrived, Remington quickly converted existing 1858 revolvers to fire them. Yet in popular memory, Colt gets all the credit for the cap and ball era, and Remington has been almost entirely erased. That damned Yankee rifle they load on Sunday and shoot all week. That is what Confederate soldiers called the Henry in 1862. Designed by Benjamin Tyler Henry and produced in New Haven, Connecticut, the Henry held 16 rounds in a tube magazine beneath the barrel, firing a .44 rimfire cartridge. A Union soldier with a Henry could fire 16 shots, while a Confederate with a muzzle loader fired 3. The price was steep, $40 in 1862, almost 2 months' pay for a soldier, and the United States Army refused to adopt it because officers thought the rate of fire would waste ammunition. So soldiers bought their own. After the war, the Henry went west with returning veterans. Oliver Winchester, who had bought the failed Volcanic company years before, took the Henry design and turned it into the Winchester rifle. The Henry was the direct ancestor of the gun that won the West, but almost nobody remembers its name. Number 7. The Spencer Repeating Rifle. Third pattern. Break. Here is the rifle that should have won the West, but did not. Christopher Spencer invented it in 1860, a 7-shot lever-action rifle using self-contained metallic cartridges. President Abraham Lincoln personally test-fired one at the White House in 1863 and ordered its mass production for the Union Army. Over 200,000 Spencers were produced during the Civil War, and Union cavalry units armed with Spencers were considered unstoppable. After the war, surplus Spencers flooded the West at $7 apiece, a bargain compared to the $40 Henry. Here is where things get interesting. The Spencer used a large .52 caliber round that hit like a hammer. General George Custer armed his 7th Cavalry Scouts with Spencers, and they carried them until 1873. But here is the tragic twist. The Army replaced the Spencer with the single-shot Trapdoor Springfield because it was cheaper to issue 1 bullet per soldier. That decision led directly to disaster 3 years later at the Little Bighorn. Number 6. The Sharps Buffalo Rifle. If any single weapon reshaped the American West, it was this one. The Sharps Model 1874, chambered in .50-90 caliber, could kill a buffalo at 1,000 yards. Between 1870 and 1880, a small army of commercial buffalo hunters, armed with Sharps rifles, slaughtered over 30 million American bison, reducing the herd from 60 million to fewer than 1,000 animals. A Sharps cost $45 at the factory in Hartford, Connecticut, but with a custom barrel and scope could run $130. Billy Dixon famously shot a Comanche warrior off his horse at a measured 1,538 yards during the Battle of Adobe Walls in 1874, one of the longest kill shots in recorded history. The Sharps did not just kill buffalo, it destroyed the economic foundation of the Plains tribes, who depended on bison for food, shelter, tools, and clothing. The United States Army knew this and encouraged the slaughter. When the buffalo were gone, so was the resistance. Number 5. The Derringer, fourth pattern break. A man named John Wilkes Booth used one to change American history. On April 14, 1865, he fired a single .44 caliber ball from a Philadelphia Derringer into the back of President Lincoln's head at Ford's Theater. The Derringer, named for gunsmith Henry Derringer, was a single-shot pocket pistol, barely 4 inches long, made to hide in a vest pocket or a lady's muff. A Derringer cost $8 in 1865, and gamblers, prostitutes, and assassins alike carried them across the West. Wild Bill Hickok reportedly carried a Williamson Derringer as his hideout gun, tucked into his boot, the day he was shot from behind in Deadwood. The Derringer was completely useless beyond 6 feet, but inside that distance, it was tiny and deadly. For 60 years, the Derringer was the most common concealed weapon in America, tucked into boots, sleeves, and garters across every frontier town. Number 4. The Trapdoor Springfield, the one the U.S. Army tried to bury. This is the weapon the U.S. Army tried to erase from memory for almost 70 years. The Model 1873 Springfield, commonly called the Trapdoor because its breech flipped up like a door. It was a single-shot .45-70 caliber rifle, chosen over the Spencer repeater because it was cheap to manufacture and used less ammunition. Every soldier at the Little Bighorn carried one on June 25, 1876. The copper cartridges often expanded under heat and jammed in the breech. Soldiers had to pry stuck shells out with knives, while mounted Lakota warriors closed in with Henry and Winchester repeaters. Custer's men were found with broken knife blades still jammed in the breeches of their rifles, dying as they tried to clear the jams. The Army spent decades deflecting blame. Not until a 1983 archaeological survey of the Little Bighorn battlefield confirmed the mass failure of the Trapdoor Springfield did the truth become public. Over 260 soldiers died because the Army chose a cheaper weapon. Today, the Trapdoor is almost forgotten, which is exactly what the Army wanted. The Winchester Model 1873 is often called the gun that won the West, and for good reason. A lever-action rifle holding 15 rounds in a tube magazine, it fired the same .44-40 cartridge as the Colt Peacemaker, meaning a cowboy could carry one cartridge for both his rifle and his sidearm. At $50 it was expensive, but a Winchester was the most versatile weapon a frontiersman could own. It could drop a deer at 150 yards, defend a homestead from raiders, or serve as a cavalry carbine in trained hands. Over 720,000 were produced between 1873 and 1919. Here's what Hollywood gets wrong. The Model 1873 was not the most powerful rifle of its era. The Sharps hit harder. The Spencer fired faster in close quarters. But the Winchester's real genius was its universality. One rifle for every job. The rare one of 1000 grade Winchester, a factory-tested model, sells today for over $1 million at auction. Number 2. The Colt Single Action Army, also called the Peacemaker, the Frontier 6-shooter, and simply the Colt. Introduced in 1873 at $17 from the factory in Hartford, it became the most iconic handgun in American history. The United States Army adopted it as standard issue for 20 years. Lawmen, outlaws, and ordinary ranchers all carried them. Bat Masterson ordered a custom Peacemaker from the Colt factory with nickel plating and ivory grips. Pat Garrett used one to kill Billy the Kid in 1881. The gun was so reliable that Colt's slogan became "God made men," but Sam Colt made them equal. The Peacemaker is so famous that calling it forgotten seems wrong, but here is the irony. Most Americans only know the Peacemaker from Westerns. They do not know it was still in frontline military service through World War I, or that General Patton carried a custom pair with ivory grips into World War II. The real Colt is buried beneath the Hollywood myth. Number 1. The Sharps 1859 military rifle. And finally, the weapon that deserves the top spot. Not the Colt, not the Winchester, but the original Sharps breech loading rifle that changed warfare forever. Designed by Christian Sharps in 1848, the Model 1859 was the first truly effective breech-loading rifle, allowing a soldier to load from the rear instead of pouring powder down the barrel. It fired 3 times faster than any muzzleloader and could be reloaded while lying flat. At $35 from the Hartford factory, it was expensive, but Burden's sharpshooters, the elite Union sniper regiment of the Civil War, used them to shatter Confederate lines at Gettysburg. After the war, surplus Sharps rifles went west, arming buffalo hunters, Indian scouts, and railroad guards. The later Sharps Buffalo rifle was built on this foundation. Here's why it tops the list. No other single weapon shaped more of American frontier history. It armed the Union victory, hunted the buffalo to extinction, broke the Plains tribes, and ushered in the age of modern firearms. The Colt is remembered. The Winchester is celebrated. The Sharps, the rifle that actually transformed the West, has been almost entirely forgotten. There is your 25, the weapons that actually built the American frontier before Hollywood sold us a version with a single pearl-handled Colt. Which one surprised you most? The Blunderbuss, still guarding stagecoaches in 1855? The LeMat, firing both bullets and buckshot? The Trapdoor Springfield the Army tried to bury for 70 years? Drop a number in the comments. Your great-great-grandfather knew these weapons by name. Now you do too.